Resuming debate, the honourable member for Brantford-Brant, Six Nations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. A couple of housekeeping matters to address. Seeking consent from the House to be able to split my time.
Does the honourable member have consent to split his time? Agreed.
I thank my colleagues, and I'll be splitting my time with mon collègue du Mont.
My colleague, the member for Montmorency-Charlevoix.
I'll have to work on my French. So, Madam Speaker, it's always a pleasure to rise and speak on behalf of the incredible residents that put me in this incredible position to represent them in the House of Commons. Today I rise to speak to this government bill, Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act. Let me begin where I think all of us in this House can agree. We support the objective of protecting vulnerable communities from the rising levels of hate and extremism that we see literally daily in this country. We support giving police and prosecutors the tools they need to keep Canadians safe from coast to coast, in their homes, in their schools, in their places of worship, and in community spaces. But, Madam Speaker, the bill itself is currently flawed in its current form. It cannot go ahead as the Liberals have drafted it, and it is my duty today to explain why. First, we need to talk about timing. Where was this legislation almost 2 years ago? We are about to not celebrate, but to approach the October 7th massacre in Israel. So where was this government in terms of advancing legislation? Because literally overnight we saw an expansion of hatred directed towards Jewish peoples. And it wasn't in just large cities, it just penetrated the entire country. Jewish Canadians were targeted in their communities. Students were harassed simply for going to school. Synagogues across this country were being shot at a regular basis, being firebombed. They had to increase their level of security. Where was this Liberal government to address these criminal acts? Where were the Liberals as Islamophobia rose in Canada, when mosques were threatened, when Muslim families felt unsafe simply walking in their neighborhoods? And let's not forget, there's absolutely zero reference to Christianity. Christianity is under attack in this country. I don't know what was funny about Christianity being under attack, but nevertheless, Madam Speaker, churches have been burned, Christian churches have been burned at an alarming rate. Between May of 2021 and December of 2023, 33 Christian churches have been burned in this country, with the vast majority being arson-based. For years, communities cried out for protection. What they got instead from their federal Liberal government was silence. And now, years late, the government has tabled a bill that, quite frankly, feels more like a political gesture than a serious plan. Make no mistake, Madam Speaker, the numbers are alarming. Since 2015, police reported hate crimes in Canada have increased by 258%. Anti-Semitic hate crimes alone are up 416%. Hate crimes against South Asians have risen by almost 380%. In 2024 alone, Canada saw almost 5,000 police-reported hate crimes, the highest number on record. In Toronto alone, hate crime occurrences jumped by 19% in a single year, with assault-related hate crimes rising by 42%. These numbers are not just statistics, they represent real Canadians, our neighbours, our friends, our co-workers, our children, who all deserve confidence knowing that they are safe and secure. This is why Conservatives have been abundantly clear. We support stronger protections. But supporting that objective does not mean rubber stamping a flawed piece of legislation. What are the problems with Bill C-9? The bill as drafted is vague and broad. Civil liberty organizations across Canada have already raised the alarm. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has warned that the intimidation and obstruction provisions risk capturing peaceful protest and legitimate dissent. The BC Civil Liberties Association said the same. The poorly drafted language could criminalize demonstrations, even when they are peaceful and lawful. These are independent organizations dedicated to protecting charter rights, and they are telling us loudly that Bill C-9 risks going too far. As you've heard by way of questioning to the minister, the removal of Attorney General consent for hate propaganda charges. Police officers and prosecutors I have spoken with see that consent as an important safeguard, a so-called safety valve that ensures these powerful tools are not misused. Now, the minister, in response to a question from my colleague from York Centre, in my view, minimized the potential consequential impact of removing Attorney General consent from private prosecutions. His response was, we want to remove the political influence. As a former member of the Attorney General's office in the province of Ontario, I'm rather offended by that, because he is indicating that my boss at that time, the provincial Attorney General, was highly political, and his consent or her consent to continuing a prosecution was made depending on what political affiliation he or she belonged to. That is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It is a safety valve that has been in place for some significant time. It is not an onerous requirement, and it ensures that legitimate charges are prosecuted as laid by the police, but more importantly, it will limit and almost completely eliminate overzealous litigants, private litigants, who feel for whatever reason that they want to lay a private complaint against another individual for comments that they deemed to be offensive in the circumstances. So it provides a very important safeguard, Madam Speaker. The third problem I identify is the definition of hatred, and I kind of raised this issue already with the minister. C-9 as drafted, the government indicates, the minister just indicated, that it codified the definition of hatred as found in the Supreme Court of Canada as being defined as detestation or vilification. On its face, this seems consistent, but by removing the word extreme in the definition by learned justices in the Supreme Court of Canada, this government has lowered the legal threshold, enabling police to lay a multitude of charges at a lower level of inspection and investigation, which in my view could open up the floodgates for litigation. That is a concern. When they say they codify, they should be using the exact words in the Supreme Court of Canada. The risk is that speech that is protected in a free democracy could be swept into a different category as true hate. This is not what Canadians want. It is not what our charter says. Let me be clear. Conservatives support the goal of keeping Canadians safe from hate-motivated crime. We support police and prosecutors having the tools they need to act. We support ensuring synagogues, mosques, cultural centers, and schools are safe, but we also support protecting civil liberties. And I see my time is coming to a fast end, so I'm going to conclude with the following. Canadians deserve protection from hate. They need to feel safe wherever they may be. They deserve to live in a country where freedom of speech and peaceful protests are respected. Bill C-9 as drafted does not get that balance right. It is flawed. It is late. It cannot proceed in its current form. We support protecting Canadians from threats, intimidation, obstruction, and violence, but we will not rubber stamp a flawed bill. We will stand up for vulnerable communities and for civil liberties. We will push for a law that truly represents and protects Canadians without undermining the freedoms they defined as a country. That is our commitment. That is our responsibility. and that is the balance Canadians expect us to strike. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Madam Speaker, in consultations for this piece of legislation, we heard from many Jewish organizations, and one issue that they brought up was that having to have the charge cleared through the Attorney General had made it so cumbersome that no charges were ever laid. So although there are provisions even currently for hate crimes, not a standalone one like this bill creates, it was very rarely enforced, and the community felt oftentimes threatened, intimidated, and the victims of hate crimes that were never prosecuted in court. I want to know what my colleague feels about those comments that came from Jewish organizations.
Member for Brantford-Brant South, Six Nations.
I've got several responses. Firstly, I thank my friend for asking that particular question. So I want to highlight again, obtaining Attorney General consent is not a cumbersome process. There are a number of potential prosecutions and offenses currently in the criminal code that already require Attorney General consent. So the issue that is too timely, it will delay a potential prosecution, I can lay to rest because that is not reality. The other issue that she raises is whether or not the issue of private prosecutions can be overcome by the Attorney General consent. And as I indicated in my speech, Madam Speaker, that raises the specter of overzealous litigants simply abusing the process. The Act is currently stated that this particular form of hatred needs to be attached to another offense of any other act of Parliament. So that could include our political opponents under the Elections Act. There could be numerous examples where things that are said under the guise of freedom of expression can be determined by a political opponent to be vilified or somehow a detestation element, and therefore they want to proceed with the prosecution. That is why you need Attorney General consent.
Le député de Jonquière.
Honourable Member for Jonquière. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As we said, this bill does have some merit. It needs to be studied at committee. Earlier, the minister, in responding to response to two questions, said he was ready to look at the religious exemption with respect to studies at committee. I'm wondering, is the Conservative Party also open to this and ready to review the religious exemption that is given when hateful symbols are shown?
Brantford South, Six Nations.
Nothing is off the table.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre. Edmonton West, I'm sorry.
Not to worry, Edmonton Centre will be Conservative again, I'm sure, in the next election. I want to thank my colleague for his speech, and he brought up the issue of churches being burnt down. Now, we've seen a massive increase in hate attacks across the country since this government took power 10 long years ago. I wonder if my colleague could comment on what has taken the government, or why it's taken them so long to act, and also the previous Prime Minister's comment about burning churches down was, quote, fully understandable.
Member for Brantford-Brant South, Six Nations.
I find Justin Trudeau's comments in this House and outside this House with respect to the burning down of Christian churches to be absolutely repulsive. It was a disgusting, disgusting statement by the head of a G7 country. And in my view, it's emblematic of how this particular government has vilified Christianity in the House of Commons. Every time a church was burned, we would be bringing it up in the House of Commons, trying to elicit response from this government, and nothing but crickets. Nothing but crickets on that side, which is disgusting, Madam Speaker.